When I was a kid, my brother and I, we loved to play cowboys. So we'd go up in the hay mow, or the loft of the barn where hay was stored. We went up there because in the hay mow you could stage things. You could build these big towers out of the square bales, and then down below you could have a nice soft spot to land. And it was really fun because then when you fell dramatically, you would fall onto this soft pile of hay. And basically we got to be our own stuntman, and it was a blast. You know, when I got out on my own, I had a roommate, and he loved the classic westerns, like the Lone Ranger, and especially he was a huge John Wayne fan. Heroes, these were men who could pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they could look out for the little guy without missing a beat. It takes a good dose of movie magic, right? And these stories are really neat for us. For my brother and I especially, we loved playing cowboys because my grandpa was doing a whole bunch of research on our family history about that time. And he would share these stories with us about our own ancestors who were living life on the frontier. Another cool thing, fun fact, my boyhood home was also the boyhood home of Wyatt Earp. These real-life heroes gave us this sense of connection with history, with reality, when we talk about these cowboy stories. The truth, though, is that these larger-than-life people were larger than life oftentimes because of the communities that they were a part of. If you've ever had the privilege of being a part of putting up a barn or even putting a wall up on a house, you know that it doesn't go easily if you just have one person, even with all the modern tools and conveniences that we have today. The idea of a lone hero can actually then distract us from some of the best parts of our history. Because even on the frontier, in a place where people are often isolated and alone, people rely on one another. That rugged individualism that we prize as North Americans, particularly here in Alberta, we can't take that to extremes without venturing into a realm of fiction, fantasy. When we try to apply it in our own lives, we call that delusion. Go ahead and turn to Ephesians chapter 4. We're going to read verses 1 through 16. Paul writes, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. In saying he ascended, what does it mean but that he had also descended into the lower regions, the earth? He who descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. I hope you can see how it really gets complicated when we try to apply that cultural value of rugged individualism to our faith in Jesus. There's three things that I think should jump out at you from this text. They really put the lie to the myth of the Lone Ranger Christian. Number one, in the Holy Spirit, we are unified. It's an inescapable fact that you will be drawn into community if your relationship with Jesus is real. Number two, we mature spiritually in community. You don't come to follow Jesus with certain aspects of the faith of a child, Matthew 18, 2 through 4. But if we continue as a child, Paul tells us right here in verse 14 that it's going to be a really bumpy ride. And this next one, the third one, I think it's going to be difficult for some of you, maybe even controversial. But it's the whole point of this passage. We are every last human being captive. Now, Paul sneaks it in at the very beginning of the chapter. He's sneaky because he says, personally, I, prisoner for the Lord. He's especially sneaky because he is talking about his physical condition, but he's also talking about his spiritual condition. Now, how do we know that? Take another look at verse 8. I think that for some of us, this can be a hard passage to interpret because it's easy to get distracted in all the other details that are going on in Ephesians 4. Try to apply this in the wrong place. Verse 8 says, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives and he gave gifts to men. Paul has given us details about Christian unity, about giftedness in the church, details about what happens when the followers of Christ don't seek spiritual maturity. But the key to understanding all of these things is really understanding Paul's quotation here from Psalm 68. Now, there's a lot of theologians and religious critics alike who want to hold Paul to a modern standard of quotation and try to pin Paul's quotation down to a particular verse in Psalm 68, saying that he's misquoted or even corrected a particular verse. I think it's better, though, if we think about this in terms of Paul paraphrasing with divine inspiration the entirety of Psalm 68. He's not just pulling out a verse, he's reminding his readers about the big idea that God has conveyed in Psalm 68. And he's applying that idea from the new perspective as someone who's participating in this event rather than just looking forward to it. Psalm 68 was written from the perspective of somebody who is looking forward to a future event. Paul, though, writes to a people, the Ephesians, and also to you and me. We are participating in the event that's described in Psalm 68. It might not be immediately clear to you. In the English translation that you're reading here, Paul has invoked a sense of double captivity. He says that in Psalm 68, then we're getting this picture of a victorious military campaign. The host that is following Jesus, they were captives of the enemy, and now he is leading them as captives. So right here, right now, you're a captive. You're either captive to the ruler of this world, and you're bound by sin and death. Those are your chains. Or you're a captive to the one who has ascended, and you are bound by a new spiritual life. In Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12, you can read about all the gifts that Jesus has given to these captives. But here Paul isn't talking about those gifts. Maybe hard to believe, but in this context, the gift being given isn't a talent, but a person. If you've said that Jesus is Lord and you really intend to follow through on that statement, your life is not your own. The one who owns you has given you to one another so that we can build one another up in every way, becoming like Jesus. Now, if you're pulling back from the community that Jesus Christ is giving you to, then you're also choosing to pull back from the spiritual growth and to withhold the gifts that Jesus intended for you and for the benefit of others. And yet, we continue to invest in this myth of the Lone Ranger Christian. I think there's a lot of reasons for this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat below, or send me an email. But one of the biggest things that I've seen is that a lot of people think that because we have a personal relationship with Jesus, that it's therefore also a private relationship that's off limits for discussion in most contexts. Again, we can come to this conclusion for a lot of different reasons, but it's certainly not coming from the Bible. A lot of times we've held back because we've been hurt by that very same community that Jesus gave us to. If that's you, I want to start out as a church leader by just saying that I'm sorry that that's happened to you. And sometimes this happens because there are wolves among the flock leaders. They're following something other than Jesus. They're doing things in His name for the wrong reasons. But we all share responsibility as followers of Jesus to do better and call out those false teachers. More often, though, I think it happens, we get hurt by the church because, like Paul describes here in Ephesians 4, we are all in a process of maturing. As a young man, I really felt let down at one point by the church, and for years I participated in community begrudgingly. I drug my feet the whole way. God gave prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers, though, who helped chip away at the walls that I'd put up. And they helped me to understand, ultimately, that a big part of it was my own immaturity. That was causing the pain and my spiritually stunted growth. You see, we've been called into a community that's full of people who have rough edges, you included, different levels of maturity and immaturity. Some of us, we haven't fully adjusted to the new freedom that we have under our new captor. And it's going to take grace if we're really going to live in community. So my challenge for you today, before we jump into discussion via email or in the comments below, my challenge for us as a church is to double down on living as a part of the community that God has given to. If you haven't signed up for a grace group or a discipleship group or something like that, stop making excuses. If you need to sit down with a friend, list out the reasons that you aren't living in community. Pray and ask God to help you get over yourself. And quit trying to do it all on your own. Now, if you're already in your group, I want you to take time this week. Ask your leader how you can step up this year as a member of your group. What is the next step for you as a disciple? Find out and get busy doing it already. Step up and be counted. We need each other to be everything that Jesus has called us to be like Him. I want to thank you for taking time to join us today, and I want to encourage you to leave your comments below. Reach out to us. We are going to be meeting in Kincooley Park this Sunday at 2 p.m. The weather looks like it's going to be warm enough and sunny, and so I really hope to see you there. Join us for the in-person discussion, or certainly reach out to me online, weston@gracepoint.ca. You can find out more information about our church on our website, gracepoint.ca. Thank you so much, and God bless.